I have no compassion left for today. That precious resource has been fully used up. Saying that as a healthcare worker might get me canceled. I don't know. Or it might get a bunch of other healthcare workers relating and being like, same girl. Either way, just keeping it real. Hey guys, it's been a while. I've spent the last year working as a social worker in a hospital, and it has been such an exciting, crazy experience. I've seen some stuff and I've had some interactions that I never thought I would. And I have learned so much. I wouldn't take this experience back for the world. But man, I am so burnt out. Like, I did not even know that this level of burnout was possible. The tricky thing about burnout is that it can sometimes sneak up on you without you even realizing it. Or we might already be burnt out and not even realize it until things get uglier than they really have to. That's exactly what happened to me, and if you clicked on this video, you might be going through something similar. So in this video, I wanted to go over what exactly is burnout, what are some of the telltale signs that we might be burnt out or might be approaching burnout, and finally some of the things that I've been doing this past month to recover from burnout, in the hopes that you might find it helpful if you're going through a similar thing. What is burnout? When we think of burnout, the first thing that often comes to mind is something along the lines of exhaustion from being stressed and overworked for a really long time. And yes, that is essentially what burnout is, but I think there is more to it than just that. I came across this explanation of burnout that really resonated with me by this professor that studies burnout called Dr. Cherry Kernis, and he says that burnout is caused by the disconnect between an individual and the culture of the company in which they worked. I found one of the most difficult parts of being a hospital social worker was balancing your desire to help with your mandate to follow the organization's rules. I think there's remarkable work being done in the hospital every single day. Personally, I just found it really difficult to follow the organization's corporate policies when they did not allow me to provide the help to a patient that they needed. And this just made me feel really morally conflicted, and the energy that I spent trying to manage this moral conflict was in addition to the energy I was already spending taking care of patients. And over time, this just continued to drain and drain my energy until I burnt out. And this kind of disconnect can happen no matter what field or industry you might work in. If your personal values conflict with the values of the organization that you work for, that could be a really burnouty environment for you. So I wanted to share some of the signs and symptoms that I was experiencing that made me think, maybe I'm burnt out. And as we're going through these, I invite you to also check in with yourself to see which ones you might be experiencing too. Extreme exhaustion. I have never had so much difficulty getting out of bed. Like, I'm usually quite a morning person, and my body usually wakes up naturally without an alarm around 7 in the morning, and I usually wake up being like, yeah, let's get shit done. But on the weekends when I didn't have to go to work, I felt like my body wasn't physically able to get out of bed until like noon. And on days that I did have to get out of bed early for work, pain. I thought there was something physically wrong with me. Like, I went to a doctor and requested blood work to see, like, do I have any nutritional deficiencies? Are my hormone levels off? But nope, my blood work came back normal, and even my doctor was like, you're probably just burnt out, and wrote me a letter to take sick leave. So if you're also experiencing extreme exhaustion or fatigue, and no matter how much sleep you're getting at night, you're still not waking up feeling refreshed, I invite you to also ask yourself, is it possible that you're burnt out? Difficulty sleeping. It also didn't help my exhaustion that I was having a lot of sleep problems. Like, I was having a lot of difficulty falling asleep at night because I'd just be lying in bed ruminating about all the hard stuff that happened that day and everything that I have to do the next day. I'd be waking up in the middle of the night and sometimes I wouldn't be able to fall asleep after. So yeah, my sleep quality was really not awesome, and I'd also invite you to ask yourself, is there any relationship between your sleep quality and your level of burnout? Brain fog. Have you ever had that feeling where your brain just feels like fuzzy? It's like your head is filled with cotton or something. And this state of brain fog pretty much became my default state. And it became really difficult to think clearly and concentrate. And yeah, it just felt like I was on autopilot all the time. Irritability. I became a monster. Before I burnt out, I'd say I was a pretty warm, friendly, bubbly person, but people meeting me for the first time over the past few months probably thought I was a bitch. So if you also find yourself getting more annoyed more easily, or you're just in this constant state of frustration and you're snapping more at people than you normally do, that could be another sign of burnout. Apathy and loss of motivation. I would lose count of the amount of times I would say,
I don't give a fuck,
in a single day. And I really didn't like that because I'm usually someone who gives a fuck. I just found myself having very little compassion anymore, and that made it very, very difficult to do my job well. Like, my compassion was my main motivator to work in healthcare and help patients in the first place, and without it, I hate to admit it, but it just felt like I had to drag my feet to see patients some days, and I just really didn't like that I had developed this apathy towards something that used to feel so exciting and purposeful. This was a huge sign to me that something was off. So if you also find yourself losing motivation or not caring about something that used to be really meaningful to you, I'd say that is truly one of the main signs of burnout. You don't feel like yourself. Deep down, I think we all know ourselves pretty well, and we can just tell when something just doesn't feel right. And a lot of the times we end up not feeling like ourselves because we've been neglecting our needs for a really long time, or we've been changing our personal values so that we can focus on our job more. And I realize in hindsight that that's what I was doing, but at the time I didn't know that that's what I was doing until I got to a point where I was just like, I just don't feel like myself anymore. So if you also think that you might be burnt out, I'd invite you to ask yourself, do I still feel like myself? So those were some of the main things that I was experiencing that made me think that I was burnt out. There were definitely some other signs, like I was feeling a lot more pessimistic and cynical. I was just feeling like numb and empty a lot of the time, and I just had this overall feeling of being dissatisfied with life, and it was honestly miserable. And I got to a point where I was just like, enough, and I started taking steps and making changes to my daily routine to get me out of that state and recover. And I'm gonna share with you what I did, and I promise you I didn't do anything drastic like escape to Bali for 2 months. These are very practical things that anyone can do, and the very first thing that I did that was probably also the hardest thing that I did was I admitted to myself that I was burnt out. I think there was part of me that was hesitant to admit this to myself, even though deep down I knew, because it almost felt like I was admitting weakness, like I didn't have the strength to like push through this challenge or something. And looking back now, that is completely toxic. Like, pushing yourself through a situation that is just not working for you serves absolutely no purpose. All it does is make you feel worse. And it's actually funny because I can actually trace the beginning of my recovery process to the moment that I admitted to myself that I was burnt out. And having that acceptance and understanding of yourself is actually the only way that you're going to be able to process through your feelings and come up with solutions to start making you feel better. Once I was finally able to admit to myself that I was burnt out, I then told someone else. Now, I am very, very fortunate that I have some wonderful friends who listen and care. And I really encourage you to also tell someone you trust or a therapist. I'm always a huge proponent of therapy. There's lots of accessible, affordable options out there now. But not talking about your burnout can actually make things worse because it can just feel so isolating. And having someone listen and understand how you're feeling and where you're coming from, that is the single most healing thing that you can experience. And the last thing that I did was I made some significant changes to my daily routine. A lot of the time when people talk about recovering from burnout, they often say things like, I just need to take a vacation, or I just need to stay in my bed in my pajamas for a few days, or I just need a wild night out with my friends and then I'll feel better. The truth is that these things might make you feel better for a bit of time, but they are essentially just band-aid solutions. If we're not changing something that we were doing prior to that vacation or that night out that made us burn out in the first place, it's only going to be a matter of time before we slip back into that state again. So we really need to change something that we are doing day to day. Personally, for me, I was able to go down to part-time at my job, and that has opened up more time for me to do things that bring me joy, like spend time with my puppy or make more of these videos. And this transition to part-time didn't just happen overnight. I did give it a lot of thought and I did have to work towards it, and I'm grateful that I'm in a financial position now where I'm able to work part-time for now until I find something that works better for me. So I also invite you to ask yourself, what isn't working for you right now in your daily routine that's draining your energy? And what changes can you make to reserve your energy and restore your enjoyment of life? And it doesn't have to be anything drastic. It can be something as small as taking a 5-minute break during your workday to go outside and get some fresh air and stretch. Just something that brings you joy and that's good for your mental health, that can break up that daily routine. So those are some of the things that I have been doing to recover from burnout this past month. I can honestly say I'm already feeling so much better, so much lighter and happier. My energy is back. I feel excited and hopeful about the future again. I hope this video was helpful if you're going through some burnout of your own. And if you are, I'd really just like you to remember that burnout isn't overcome in a day. It does take some trial and error, and eventually you will find something that works way better for you, and it does get better. I promise. And if you've discovered anything that has really helped with burnout lately, then please share it with me in the comments. I'm always looking for more ideas. Until next time, I hope you're staying healthy and staying safe. Bye.